Welcome back, second graders. Today is Friday, May 15th, 2020, and today we are going to continue working on measurement. For today's lesson, before we jump into our problem-solving task, we are going to talk a little bit about common things in our house that we might find and how long they are. Now, the reason why we're going to do this is because today we are going to be practicing estimating how long or how tall or how wide something is in either inches or feet. And so in order to do that, it's really important to have a benchmark, an idea of how long something is. So let's start off with inches. Right here in my hand is I have a key. Now when I measure this key in inches, it's about, and I want to make sure you can see this, the key is about 2 inches long. So to give you an idea about how long 2 inches long is, you can ask mom or dad, or maybe you have your own key. And a basic key is about 2 inches long. So that should give you a clear picture in your head of inches. Another really great thing that we can do is we can measure how long a DVD is. Now we're going to measure how tall this DVD is first, and we're going to use inches. The height of this DVD is just a little bit more than 7 inches. So to give you a picture of what 7 inches looks like, that is the height of this DVD. You might have one of these around your house. Awesome. Another thing that I know we all have is a piece of paper. Notebook paper is a little bit smaller, but this is just a piece of colored computer paper. So if I was measuring how tall this piece of colored computer paper is, the answer is going to be 11 inches. There you go, 11 inches. 11 inches, as we can tell, is pretty close to 12. It's pretty close to the entire length of a ruler. So this piece of paper should generally give you a good idea about what 12 inches looks like, which means this also gives you a good idea about what 1 foot looks like. So when you're estimating measurements in feet, you can think about something that's a little bit longer than a piece of paper would represent just 1 foot. Awesome. Something else that you can think about is your doorways. Wherever there's a door in your house, from the floor to the top of that door, that measures about 6.5 to 7 feet. So that's about 7 feet tall. So whenever you're measuring something that's really long or really large, really tall, really wide, you can think about the height of a door. That's usually about 7 feet tall, so you can picture that in your head and then think about how many doors something would be to help you create a good estimate. These benchmarks are really, really important because they're going to help you make accurate estimates. One other one I want to talk to you quickly about is your Chromebook. Now, I don't have a Chromebook. I know so many of you do and you're using it. I have a bigger laptop, but a Chromebook is also really helpful to imagine what 1 foot looks like, because when your Chromebook is closed like this, the length from here to here, from my finger to my finger, that is 1 foot. So that's a really good picture that you can use to imagine what 1 foot looks like. And most of you I know are using these Chromebooks, so this will be really helpful for you because it'll be right in front of you. Awesome. Now that we have those benchmarks in our head, I want us to take a look at our problem-solving task. Our problem-solving task has 2 parts. So in order to be ready for your problem-solving task, I want you to grab some scrap paper and something to write with. Now, the first part of our problem-solving task is what I'm gonna have you work on before we do part B. So, when it comes to estimating and measurement, it's really important that you figure out what unit you're gonna use first. We know that inches are a much smaller unit than feet. So most likely you're going to be using inches when something isn't very large, isn't very tall, isn't very wide, isn't very big. So here you go. What I want you to do on your paper is set up your paper so it's almost like this chart, so like a little T-chart, where on one side you have objects you would measure in inches. You could just write inches for short, that's fine. And objects you would measure in feet. You could write feet. And then you have a list here. You have length of a spoon, length of a kitchen table, height of a refrigerator, height of an oven or stove, height of a coffee cup, or length of a dessert plate. Now, all of these are common household items that you would find in the kitchen, and your job is to figure out which ones of these would you measure in inches, and then write that underneath your inches, and which one of these would you measure in feet, and then write those underneath feet. So go ahead and pause the video and get started doing this first part. Okay. Hopefully you've been able to do this first part by pausing that video. So our job is to figure out which one of these items we'd measure in inches or feet, really determining that unit so that we can make sure that we're off to a good start. So the length of a spoon. I know that a spoon is not super large. In fact, when I think about my ruler, I'm pretty sure that a spoon is actually less than 12 inches. It's not going to be more than my ruler. So it would probably make more sense for me, because it's small, to use a small unit of measure. So I'm going to put length of a spoon, or I'm just going to write spoon here for the sake of time, under the inches side, because it's not very large, so I don't need a very large unit to measure it. Awesome, I'm going to cross that off. The next one below it says length of a kitchen table. Now, to me, a kitchen table where I sit around with my family and eat dinner, or I see my mom or dad cook things, or, chop things up, that's pretty large. And I think the best unit, because it's a bigger item that I'm measuring, I would need a bigger unit to measure with. So I'm going to put the kitchen table underneath feet. Crossing that off. Height of a refrigerator. That means how tall a refrigerator is. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my refrigerator is actually a little bit taller than I am. And I know that I'm 5 feet 4 inches tall. And I know that when I'm measuring the height of a person, I generally use feet. And so if a refrigerator is taller than me, I need that bigger unit. So instead of using inches, I'm also going to use feet here for the height of the refrigerator. So I'm going to add that to this side. Below here, the height of an oven or stove. Well, that's an interesting one, because they do come in all different shapes and sizes. But for the most part, an oven or stove is pretty large. I mean, Mackenzie, who's about 3 feet tall, it's even taller than she is. So I think the height from the floor to the top of the oven would be a larger space. So we would need to make sure that we would measure that in a bigger unit. So we're going to use feet for that. So I'm going to write oven/stove. Awesome. Height of a coffee cup. Well, coffee cups come in all different shapes and sizes, but generally speaking, those mugs that you might see people drinking coffee out of, or soup out of, or even tea, are generally kind of small objects, especially when I'm comparing it to the kitchen table or refrigerator. In fact, I think it's even smaller than a DVD, which we measured in the beginning of this video. So I'm going to say that I would need a smaller unit to measure that. So a coffee cup, I would generally measure with inches, or in inches. And the last one here says length of a dessert plate. Now, dessert plates are generally small plates. They're not the large ones that you're going to have your full meal on, but they're just smaller, so you can put like a cookie on there if you're at a party, or a cupcake, something like that. Now, because it's a small plate, I actually know that dessert plates are even smaller than pieces of notebook paper or computer paper. So because of that, and I know that a computer paper is about 1 foot, that means that a dessert plate is going to be less than 1 foot. So it wouldn't make sense for me to measure it in a large unit like feet, but instead I would use inches to measure a dessert plate. The think aloud process that I was just going through, I hope is something that you will do for the rest of this lesson, thinking about what makes sense, using those benchmarks. Like, we know our ruler is made up of 12 inches. We talked about how our DVD is about 7 inches tall. Our key is about 2 inches long. Using those benchmarks to help us really think through what a good tool would be to use to estimate, what a good unit would be to use to estimate, but also what an actual actually good estimate would be. And that's where we're coming here to part B. Part B, you need to figure out, and you can just label these out here, A, B, C, and D, and you can write this down on your paper. Part B has 4 different objects, and they have 2 different measurements for each object. Our job is to figure out which one makes the most sense. So it says, circle which estimates make the most sense. Think about the size of the objects in real life. So here's a bicycle. Clearly it's tiny on this page, but bicycles are not this small. So think about what a bicycle looks like in real life, what a crayon looks like, what a hockey stick looks like, and what a fish looks like. And then I want you to either write down the measurement that's provided that you think is the most reasonable estimate for that object. Pause the video now and go ahead and do A, B, C, and D. Okay. So hopefully you've had time to fill this out, but let's take a look at A. That's a bicycle. I know riding a bicycle, the bicycle is larger than, it's longer than I am. So I have 2 options here, 6 feet or 6 inches. Well, earlier on we talked about how, and I'm going to zoom out so you can see this again, the height of the DVD is 7 inches. If the height of a DVD is 7 inches, does it make sense that a bicycle, a real life bicycle, would be 6 inches? No. So the more reasonable estimate would be 6 feet. Okay, moving on to B down here, a hockey stick. We have 2 options, 5 feet or 5 inches. Well, we can use this DVD again to help us. The DVD, we said, is about 7 inches tall. Is a hockey stick going to be close to that at 5 inches? You would really have to bend down really low to the ground if that was the case. But 5 feet makes more sense because it needs to be about the same height as that adult player playing that sport, because they don't want to be crouching down too much, because then they wouldn't be able to actually play the sport of hockey. Okay, let's go over here to C. 3 feet, 3 inches. We talked about earlier how a piece of paper is close to 1 foot in height. Would it make sense that a crayon would be 3 of these stacked on top of each other? Probably not. We know crayons are even smaller than this marker that I'm using. So 3 inches would make more sense. It's much closer to what the length of this key is like. And lastly, D. 4 feet or 4 inches. Okay, guys. 4 feet, that's a foot taller than my daughter. That's 4 of these pieces of paper stacked on top of each other. Have you ever seen a fish? Not a dolphin, not a whale, not a shark, but just a fish that's that tall or that long? Nope. So 4 inches would make more sense. All right. Now we're going to work on some practice problems together. So I'm going to turn and we're going to jump into some practice problems. Before you do anything by yourself, we're going to do some together. So this problem here says, estimate the length of a fork. What unit are you going to estimate in? Inches or feet? Why? All right. So I have to think about a fork. I know that a fork is something that I use to eat my food. And when I think about feet, which represents 12 inches, which is about the size of this piece of paper, I don't think a fork is the same length as this. In fact, I think it's smaller. So because I think a fork is smaller, I'm actually going to estimate this in inches, using that as my unit of measure. And the reason for that, I'm going to say I'm using inches because a fork is smaller than 1 foot, period. You could also say because a fork is not a very large object, so I'm going to use a smaller unit to measure it. Now thinking about that, what would a reasonable estimate be for a fork? Well, using that benchmark again of this DVD, I know that 7 inches is the height of this DVD. And I know that a fork, similarly, it looks like my pen is about 6 inches. So I would have to say anywhere between 6 or 7 inches, because if I imagined that I was eating with my pen, that's about what a fork feels like when it's in my hand. So I would say 6 or 7 inches. And it's really important that I include that label. Great. Now for this next part, we're going to do these 3 objects together that's in this chart. We have to complete the chart. And to complete the chart, we have to figure out if a motorcycle is about 5 feet or 5 inches long. So what would make the most sense? Now, we're going to do these first 3 together, and then you're going to work on these 3. We'll label it A, B, and C, as well as the last problem for a discussion. So looking at these 3 images, the first one is a motorcycle. So is a motorcycle about 5 feet or 5 inches long? Well, 5 feet is about the height of me. I told you in the beginning I'm 5 feet 4 inches. And that would kind of make sense for a motorcycle, but would 5 inches make sense for a motorcycle? No. 5 inches wouldn't make sense because a motorcycle, something you ride on, if it was 5 inches, that means it would be smaller than the height of this DVD. That wouldn't make sense at all. So 5 feet is the right answer. So I'm going to circle the unit feet. That's how you answer these questions in the chart. A chair. A chair is about 2 feet or 2 inches wide. Well, we know from earlier that the length of this key is 2 inches. Does it make sense that a chair would be 2 inches wide? Absolutely not. So the better estimate here is 2 feet. And the last one we're going to do together is a slipper. A slipper is 8 feet or inches long. Well, guys, we talked about how a door frame, like the length of a door, from the bottom floor to the top of the door is 7 feet. Would it make sense for a slipper that goes on your feet to be 8 feet tall, which would be a foot taller than a door? Probably not. So 8 inches would actually make sense. So inches is what I'm circling. So what you're going to work on right now by pausing the video is you're going to complete our chart here. And you are going to think about, is a house 30 feet or 30 inches tall? Is a fish 4 feet or 4 inches long? Is a hammer 14 feet or 14 inches tall? And circling the correct unit or writing the correct unit, either inches or feet. And then you're going to do number 3, which says estimate the length of a couch. What unit are you going to estimate in, inches or feet? And then you have to explain why you think that, and then give an estimate. Doesn't have to be exact, but should be reasonable. So go ahead to do A, B, and C, and then answer this question below. And you can do that by pausing the video. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to figure this out after you've paused the video. So this house right here says 30 feet or 30 inches. Well, 30 inches. I know that in 1 foot there are 12 inches. So that means that 30 inches is about, not exactly, but about 3 feet. That's the height of Mackenzie. That's the height of 3 pieces of paper. I'm going to zoom out here. 3 pieces of paper stacked on top of each other. The house that I live in, and I'm sure the houses you live in, are much taller than that. So 30 feet would make more sense than 30 inches. Awesome. A fish is about 4 feet or 4 inches long. Do you think a fish could be 4 feet? 4 of these stacked on top of each other? No. And in fact, this was similar to our problem in our problem-solving task. So inches makes more sense for this. In our last one, a hammer is about 14 feet or 14 inches tall. okay? 14 inches tall would be about the height of this plus a little bit more. 14 feet tall would be 2 doors stacked on top of each other. Does that make sense that a hammer would be 2 doors stacked on top of each other? I don't think so. I don't think I could pick that up. That would be really hard to use if it was 14 feet. So inches makes the most sense. Let's take a look at question number 3, the last question here for our problem. So question number 3, we had to estimate the length of a couch. Now couches do come in all different shapes and sizes. Sometimes there are couches that have 3 cushions for them. Sometimes there are couches called love seats that only have 2. But regardless, we would use, whether it's a love seat with two cushions or a regular couch or sofa with 3, we would probably use the same unit. And we're actually going to be using feet for that. A couch is a big piece of furniture. It takes up a lot of space and it's long. So I'm using feet because a couch is a big object, period. And feet is a bigger unit than inches. So it's important that you use a unit that makes sense for the item that you're looking at. All right. And what would a reasonable estimate be? Well, Miss Dixon told me in the very beginning that the door frame, or the height of a door from the bottom of the floor to the top of the door, is about 7 feet. Now, I also know from what we've done on this page with the work of a chair, we know that a chair is about 2 feet wide. So if my cushion has about, 3, if my sofa has about 3 cushions to it, that's like almost having 3 different seats, like 3 people could fit there. So I would say that it's probably going to be 6 feet or 7 feet long. Awesome. So I know that this video had a lot of information in it, and it had a lot of me talking and doing think alouds about using our benchmarks, like the height of our DVD, the height of our piece of paper, the length of our key. And it's really important that you're doing that thinking whenever you're trying to figure out a reasonable estimate. Not only do you need to identify the unit that you want to estimate in, but you need to make sure that you're also thinking about those benchmarks to help you make a more accurate estimate. If you have any questions about estimating in feet or inches, please definitely reach out to your teachers. And if you have any pictures for Spirit Week wearing purple today, please definitely send those also to your teachers or to our parent Facebook page. Right now is your time to jump into your exit ticket. I want you to do your best work on that and submit it whenever you're done. And I will be back next week with another video for you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.